Chapter 23. When the other guest had gone, Albert said to Monte Cristo, "Allow me to begin my duties as your cicerone by showing you a typical Paris bachelor's apartment." Albert led the Count to his study, which was his favorite room. Monte Cristo was a worthy appreciator of all the objects Albert had collected here. Old chests, Japanese porcelain, Oriental cloth, Venetian glassware, and weapons from every country in the world. Everything was familiar to him, and at first glance, he recognized the century and the country of origin. Albert had expected to explain things, but instead the Count gave him a little course in archaeology, mineralogy, and natural history. Albert took his guest into the salon, whose walls were covered with the works of modern painters. He expected to have something new to show the strange traveler this time, but to his great surprise, the Count, without having to look at the signatures, was able to name the painter of each work, and in such a way that it was easy to see that not only were the names of these artists familiar to him, but he had carefully studied and evaluated the talent of each of them. From the salon they went into the bedroom, which was a model of both elegance and simple good taste. The only painting there was a portrait signed by Leopold Robert. This picture attracted the Count's attention immediately. It was a portrait of a young woman about 26 years old, with a dark complexion, fiery eyes, and languishing eyelids. She was dressed like a Catalan fisherwoman, with a black and red bodice and gold pins in her hair. She was looking at the sea. Her lovely profile stood out against a background of waves and sky. Monte Cristo stood staring at this portrait in silence for a time. Then he said in a perfectly calm voice, "You have a beautiful mistress, Vicomte, and her costume, which is no doubt a masquerade costume, is exquisitely becoming to her." "That's a mistake for which I wouldn't forgive you if there were another portrait beside this one," said Albert. "That's a portrait of my mother. It was painted 6 or 8 years ago. As far as I know, the costume is a product of her own imagination, and the resemblance is so good that it seems to me I can still see her as she was in 1830. She had the portrait painted during my father's absence, thinking, no doubt, that it would be a pleasant surprise for him on his return, but strangely enough, it displeased him. Not wishing to part with such a work of art altogether, my mother gave it to me. Excuse me for discussing family matters with you, but since I'm soon going to have the honor of introducing you to my father, I thought it would be best to tell you this so that you wouldn't inadvertently praise the portrait before him. I wrote to him from Rome telling him about the service you rendered me there, and both he and my mother are eager to have the opportunity to thank you for it." Albert called his valet and ordered him to inform the Count and Countess of Morcerf that the Count of Monte Cristo would call on them shortly. Albert and Monte Cristo followed the valet as he left. In the salon of the Morcerf residence they came face to face with the Count of Morcerf himself. He was a man in his early 40s, but he appeared to be at least 50, and his black mustache and eyebrows contrasted strangely with his almost white hair, which was cut short in the military manner. Okay, so the Count is meeting the parents of Albert. "Father," said Albert, "allow me to introduce the Count of Monte Cristo, the generous friend whom I was fortunate enough to meet in the difficult circumstances I've already described to you." "You are welcome here," said the Count of Morcerf, bowing to Monte Cristo with a smile. "In saving the life of our son, you have rendered us a service which commands our eternal gratitude. The Countess was in her dressing room when your visit was announced. She will be down within 10 minutes. "It's a great honor for me," said Monte Cristo, "to make the acquaintance on the first day in Paris of a man whose worth equals his reputation and who has been justly rewarded by fortune. But hasn't fortune still a marshal's baton to offer you?" "Oh, I've left the service," said Morcerf, blushing slightly. The July Revolution was apparently glorious enough to allow itself to be ungrateful for any service which did not date from the imperial period, so I tendered my resignation. I entered politics, and I now devote myself to industry and the study of the useful arts, something for which I had a desire during my 20 years in the army, but for which I had no time." "That's the kind of thing that makes your country superior to all others," said Monte Cristo. "You were a gentleman of high birth, and you had a large fortune, yet you were willing to earn your promotions as an obscure soldier. Then, after you had become a general, a peer of France, and a commander of the Legion of Honor, you were willing to begin a second apprenticeship, with a hope of no other reward than that of some day being useful to your fellow-men. That, Monsieur de Morcerf, was a magnificent, I will even say sublime gesture." Albert looked at Monte Cristo in astonishment. He was not accustomed to hear him speak with such enthusiasm. "If I weren't afraid of tiring you, Count," said the general, obviously charmed by what Monte Cristo had said, "I'd take you to the chamber with me today. Today's debate will be rather interesting for someone who isn't acquainted with our modern senators." Man, the Count, he's such a flatterer. He can flatter so well, no? And right away, the father of Albert is like, wow, I like the Count, because the Count really flattered him. "He's so sneaky. I'd be very grateful to you if you would renew that invitation another time," replied Monte Cristo. "But today I've been given the hope of meeting the Countess, and I'd like to wait for her." "Here's my mother now," said Albert. Monte Cristo turned around quickly and saw Madame de Morcerf standing in the doorway of the salon. She was pale, and when Monte Cristo turned to look at her, she let drop her arm, which for some reason she had been leaning against the gilded doorpost. She had been there for several seconds, long enough to overhear the visitor's last words. Monte Cristo stood up and bowed deeply to the Countess, who responded with a silent and ceremonious bow. "What's the matter?" asked Morcerf. "Is the heat of the salon too much for you?" "Are you ill, mother?" cried Albert, rushing toward Mercedes. Plot twist. Oh man. Okay, this book, again, it's tiring to read, but then things start connecting and it's so satisfying. So, the mother of Albert is Mercedes, no? As in Mercedes, Dantes' Mercedes. And so we know that the father of Albert then is Fernando Mondego, okay, one of the men who betrayed Dantes as well. Okay, so we now know that Fernand and Mercedes got married. They had a son named Albert, and Albert is marrying the daughter of Danglars. So it's all connecting na guys, no? And now we know why the Count wants to get close to Albert. It's so that he will start to have influence and connection with these men that he wants to have revenge over, no? And Mercedes again is there, and when Mercedes sees the Count, she turns very, very pale. She thanked both of them with a smile. "No," she said, "but I was slightly overcome with emotion at seeing for the first time the man without whom our house would now be in mourning. Count," she continued, walking toward Monte Cristo with the majesty of a queen, "I owe my son's life to you, for which I bless you, and now I'm grateful to you for giving me the chance to thank you as I have blessed you. That is from the bottom of my heart." Monte Cristo bowed once again, more deeply than the first time. He was even paler than Mercedes. "I've already apologized to the Count for being obliged to leave him," said Morcerf. "The session began an hour ago, and I'm to make a speech." "Go on then," said the Countess. "I'll try to make up to the Count for your absence." Then turning to Monte Cristo, she said, "Would you do us the honor of spending the rest of the day with us?" "I'm extremely grateful to you for your offer, madame, but I arrived in Paris only today, and I came straight here. I haven't even seen my house yet." "Then, can we count on the pleasure of seeing you another time?" asked Mercedes. Monte Cristo bowed without answering, but his gesture could have been taken for one of assent. After Albert had shown Monte Cristo to the door, he returned to find that his mother had gone to her boudoir. "Are you sure you're not ill, mother?" he asked as he entered. "When you came into the salon, you were very pale." There was a silence, then the Countess asked, "What is this name of Monte Cristo? Is it a family name, the name of an estate, or simply a title?" "I think it's nothing but a title, mother. Monte Cristo is the name of a small island which the Count has bought. In any case, he makes no claim to nobility, although the general opinion in Rome is that he's a very great lord." "How old would you say he is?" asked Mercedes, apparently attaching great importance to this question. 35 or 36? So young! That's impossible. But it's true nevertheless. He told me so on several different occasions when he had no reason not to tell the truth. Mercedes bowed her head as though weighed down by a flood of bitter thoughts. "Does he like you, Albert?" she asked with a nervous shudder. "I think so. And are you fond of him?" "Yes, I like him, despite what Franz d'Epinay says about him." Franz claimed the Count was a man who had come back from the next world. The Countess made a movement of terror. "Albert," she said, in a strange voice, "I've always put you on your guard against new acquaintances. You're a man now, and as capable of giving advice as of taking it. But let me tell you once again, be careful, Albert." If I'm to take advantage of your advice, Mother, I'll have to know what to guard against. The Count doesn't gamble, he drinks nothing but water mixed with a little Spanish wine, and he's so rich that he certainly won't ask to borrow money from me. What have I to fear from him?" "You're right," said Mercedes. "My fears are foolish, especially in regard to a man who saved your life. By the way, did your father receive him well? He's so busy, and he's sometimes so worried about his affairs that he might unintentionally—" "Father was perfect," interrupted Albert, "and furthermore, he seemed highly flattered by several compliments the Count slipped into the conversation with such ease that it seemed as though he'd known him for 30 years. They parted the best of friends. In fact, Father even wanted to take him to the chamber with him." Mercedes said nothing. She was so deeply absorbed in her own thoughts that her eyes had gradually closed. Albert stood looking at her with that filial affection which is all the more tender and loving in children whose mothers are still young and beautiful. Then, thinking she had dozed off, he tiptoed out of the room and carefully closed the door behind him. Another huge revelation, no? In the last chapter, we find out that Albert is engaged to the daughter of Danglars, and in this chapter, we find out that Albert is the son of Fernand and of Mercedes. What other plot twists are there gonna be?